The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the third day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 28th of Av, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Tuesday, August 11th, 2026. We will read Parshat Shoftim this coming Shabbat. Let's begin. Parshah. We are still in Parshat Shoftim. We're on the third aliyah today. We'll be looking at verses, chapter 17, verse 8 through 10. We're going to continue looking specifically at how court cases are decided. What do we do when we are not sure of how to decide in a particular court case? So the verses go like this. Ki yipla yipale mimcha davar lamishpat bein dam ladam bein din ladin. If a case is too baffling for you to decide, be it a controversy over homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute in your courts, you shall promptly repair to the place that the Eternal your God will have chosen, and appear before the Levitical priests or the magistrate in charge at the time, and present your problem. When they have announced to you the verdict in the case, you shall carry out the verdict that is announced to you from that place that God chose, observing scrupulously all their instructions to you. So these verses pretty simply seem to describe a case where a judge is trying to decide a particular case, but it is too complicated. There are complicating factors that make it really hard to understand who is right or which way to rule, and that you therefore have to go to the central place in which God chooses. We know this is going to be Jerusalem, and the larger courts there, and then eventually the Sanhedrin there, and appear before the Levitical priests or the magistrate in charge at the time, right? So appear before the leaders or whatever higher leader, and follow whatever verdict that they come up with, and make sure to observe it. Very important idea here that, sometimes a judge in a particular district or a particular place, the case will be too difficult, and they need to go to a higher authority or a more learned authority to ask and to try to understand how to solve this particular issue here, or how to decide this particular case. What I want to focus on today, though, is this first verse. Ki yipalei mimcha davar lemishpat. It's a kind of a funny word. And you can see here the translation is kind of strange. Is it baffling? It's baffling. I'm baffled. It's kind of a strange translation here. Pella usually means wondrous, right? Or something is mysterious. But still, even that, if the thing is mysterious or wondrous in your eyes, right? That's kind of strange. And so you can see how the translator chose this idea baffling or confusing. I don't know how to rule exactly. And it's really beautiful to see how Rashi sort of understands this verb here and how it's used. Rashi says in the meaning of this particular verb, ki yipla kol hafla'a l'shon havdala ufrisha sha'davar nivdal u'mechusa mimcha. Right? So the way he's understanding this is saying, it's not that it's just wondrous, it's the fact that it's separate from you. That the thing is separate and covered or concealed from oneself. And so that is the operative meaning of pella here, or ki yifla. And when you put it back into the verse, it actually makes much more sense. Ki yipla mimcha davar lemishpat. When something is separate from you in terms of its mishpat, in terms of its justice. And so what is actually separate from you is the justice itself. Here, the verse seems to be saying justice is deciding correctly a particular case or particular situation so that it is fair, right? So that the correct outcome comes out and the problem is solved in a just and fair way. When we don't have that, there is no justice. So instead of saying the case is baffling from you, I think that's not really a strong statement. What really is What's happening is that you are at a temporary time as a judge, as a society, when a judge can't decide a case, separated from justice. That justice is actually hidden. And what the justice is doing by bringing it to a higher authority or a more centralized authority is making justice reappeal from its concealment and reconnecting once again justice to society. I think this is a beautiful way of just thinking about what it means for a court case to be decided or a conflict to be mediated fairly. Is at the time when conflicts are not mediated fairly and things are not fair, we are separate from justice. We are not connected to it. But rather, by trying cases fairly, by the correct judgment coming out, we are once again connected to justice. And justice is something that we need to be connected to, that shouldn't be separate from us or different from us, but rather should be connected to us, something that we pursue connection with at every moment. A very important idea within Torah life. Halacha. Let's turn to the halachot of prayer. We're going to continue with a new chapter. We're going to move on to chapter 5 of the Rambam on Hilchot Tefillah and begin with the first two halachot of that. So far in the previous chapter, in chapter 4, we've been trying to address issues where the person is praying at the correct zman, the correct time, but because of certain conditions, their prayer is not going to be accepted. It's not going to be considered a kosher prayer, so that you would actually have to pray the Amidah again afterwards. Now we're going to move on to chapter 5 on things that are very important, but if the circumstances are beyond one's control, that your prayer is still acceptable afterwards. So these are sort of less important than the previous chapter we talked about, but still something we should strive for in our prayer, and obviously still certainly matters. And in any ideal situation that we choose to pray or setting up for prayer, we should be focusing on these matters according to the Rambam. So he says, a person who prays must be careful to tend to the following 8 matters. However, if he is pressured, confronted by circumstances beyond his control, or transgresses and does not attend to one of them, they are not of absolute necessity. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to his language here, right? He's not saying these are optional. I think that's really important. But rather, if he's confronted by a circumstance or she's confronted by a circumstance beyond their control, or, on the other hand, transgresses and does something wrong by not attending to them, right? They're not of absolute necessity, right? So it is not as though they prevent the mitzvah of prayer, right? Ein makvin, they don't prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah itself. But pay attention to his language here. It is a transgression not to do them. So very important in terms of language here. Okay, he says these 8 things, they are standing during prayer, facing the temple, preparation of his body, proper clothing, proper place, control of his voice, bowing, and prostration. Okay, so we're going to go through each of these and take a look at them. We're going to start with standing today. In his second halacha, he says standing. What is implied? Generally, one should pray only while standing. Thus, a person sitting in a boat or in a carriage, if able to stand, should do so. If not, he may sit in his place and pray. So the idea is generally, and remember, tefillah is not just any time we're in synagogue saying words of prayer. Prayer has a very standard technical meaning within halachic literature, which is specifically the Amidah, right? The times in which we say the Shmona Esrei, or the 19 blessings that are said 3 times a day. Those are things that we should pray for, and that's why one of the reasons why the prayer is called the Amidah. Amidah means standing. So we should try to stand, but if we're in a boat or in a carriage, where it's hard to stand, but we still can technically stand, we should still do so. But if you really can't because the boat or the carriage is moving, then it's okay to sit. This is what Rambam would be considered by the Rambam, meaning forces beyond your control at this moment. So it's okay to sit. A person who is ill may pray even while lying on his side, provided he is able to have the proper intention, right? So this is very important. Nobody should say, it really hurts for me to stand. It really is a problem for me physically or from whatever way. I'm going to force myself to do it anyway. No, right? That is not necessary in the least. As Rambam clearly says here, someone who is ill for whatever reason can pray while lying down. As what really matters is that they have the proper intention while praying, that they're able to actually have the proper focus. That's what really matters. Similarly, one who is thirsty or hungry is considered as one who is ill, right? So if you're so thirsty, you're so hungry that you can't stand any longer, it's like you're ill, right? By the way, really important, this applies on Yom Kippur, right? Many times we are so thirsty, we're so hungry that it really makes it hard to stand. If that happens on Yom Kippur, you can rely on this Rambam and say, okay, I'm not going to stand. Even if the hunger or the thirst is sort of self-imposed, or at least imposed by a religion, by the mitzvot themselves, I would think that it would be okay not to stand during certain parts of the Yom Kippur service. There's so much standing, kol nidre, everything like this. If that's going to be very difficult, and especially in the Elah, when we have the ark open, the whole entire Amidah, at least in our shul, it's okay to take a seat if you need to, if you're in cases when you're so thirsty or hungry. Therefore, if he is able to concentrate properly, he should pray. If not, he should not pray until he has eaten or drunk. Remember, right? If the being thirsty or hungry is hurting you so much and makes it so that you cannot focus, remember the Rambam says at that point prayer needs to be delayed, because if you do pray, right, then it's not counted as actual prayer fulfilling the mitzvah. Unlike the matter here of standing, right, where that's not what we would call in halachic literature ma'akev. It does not prevent the mitzvah in that particular case. That's why it's so important to remember what is obligatory and what is optional or ideal. One riding an animal should not descend from the animal, even if he has someone to hold his animal. Rather, he should sit in his place and pray, so his mind will be settled. Right, so very important. Right, the idea is, and obviously we don't have this much experience in terms of riding an animal, but the idea that when maybe descending from an animal, even if someone is holding the animal, I think what the concern here is that the animal might run away, right? Or so you might be nervous the whole time that your animal is going to run away, and so therefore you won't be able to focus on your prayers. In that case, it's better to sit on the animal, right, and no longer be nervous that the animal's going to run away, then pray sitting down rather than standing up and being nervous the animal's going to run away. See, this is a very important halakhic determination the Rambam is making here, which again I think is like really important for us. Oftentimes I think when we're praying Amidah on the go, when we have to pray on the go, we're praying in a particular place. I got to get to the prayers really fast because something's going to happen, or I need to get somewhere, or I need to do this. Those are all cases where we should be delaying our Amidah according to the Rambam here. And I think that really makes sense in terms of what he's saying. And again, I think very important. Also, I think this also comes up often, when we're on an airplane. If by standing up on an airplane, you're going to be thinking the whole entire time about how rude you are, that you're annoying to other people, and that you're standing, or that you're going to fall over because the plane might all of a sudden be turbulent, and you'd be much calmer while praying while sitting down. You should sit down on a plane. Right, there's no reason to have to stand up and to force yourself to stand up when this is going to be at all concerning for you or take away from your kavanah, your intention while praying. Intention always is more important than the position in which you're standing in. Aggadah. Let's turn to Sefer Aggadah from Bialik, this incredible compendium of the legends of the Talmud and the Midrash and the homiletical material. It's been really beautiful so far. We're going to continue talking about themes of creation, as is where the book starts, and we're going to learn the third and the fourth Aggadot in the book today. So we've been talking about this idea of the limits of human knowledge, and I think when you first start reading sort of what is being said, you might think that this is talking about, where as a human beings, like what are the limits, the actual limits of the human being's ability to conceive of reality, conceive of things, that there are maybe limits in the way in which we think. But that's not what's being talked about here. What's being talked about here is a choice that we make as human beings of what to particularly think about. And that's constantly framed through the Aggadah that we're about to read. In the third Aggadah, it says, "The wise man, his eyes are at the beginning." This is from Ecclesiastes 2:14. "He is one who inquires in the world's beginning, from the 6 days of creation, and thereafter the world we live in." Right? So now there's actually a value statement put on this. Right? So there actually is, it actually is considered wise to think in a certain direction, right? It's actually considered positive. It's considered wise. It's considered a smart thing to do. This is an act of wisdom to think in this particular way. It's not like you can't be a fool here. You can and think about different things, but this is the wise, the smart path, the life-affirming path to think about only the world from the world's beginning and from the time in which the world actually was created, not before it. But the fool walketh in darkness, as the pasuk says, continues on in Ecclesiastes 2:14. "He is one who puts aside the time of the world's existence and acquires only concerning the time prior to the time of darkness," right? It's actually foolish to try to conceive of things that are beyond the created world, right? Because they have nothing to do with us. And so this is considered foolish in Torah thought. Aggadah 4 continues with this theme, but I think also helps us iron it out even more. What's the purpose of this? In Genesis 1:2, it says, "Now the earth was worthless and waste, tohu vavohu." Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Ben Sira, "Do not pry into things too hard for you to examine, what is beyond your reach. Meditate on the commandments you have been given. What the Lord keeps secret is of no concern of yours." Right? So the idea of what's being said is you should direct your mind to examine the things that are within your reach. And the things that are within your reach, things that you're supposed to be thinking about and doing, are the commandments of what God actually commanded. That's what we should be focusing on, is fulfilling the will of God in this world. And Ecclesiastes admits here, and this is actually, sorry, not Ecclesiastes, it's Ecclesiasticus. This is actually a sort of a sort of outside the canon source of Torah, but it's quoted here in the Midrash. Sometimes the Midrash will bring in those sources to say that, again, there are secrets. There are things that are beyond your understanding that we don't know, and that God specifically keeps secret and does not want us to know, and therefore we should be trying not to pry into it, because this can only be death for us. This only can be destruction for us as human beings. But here, the Aggadah explains, the Midrash explains here why to limit such inquiry. One reason for such limiting of inquiry suggested by the parable of a king who built a palace on a site of dunghills, sewers, and waste matter. Should a man come and say, "This palace was built on a site of sewers, dunghills, and waste matters," would one not be likely to value the palace less? So too should a man come and say, "This world was created upon that which was worthless and waste." Tohu vavohu. Does he not demean God's creation? Hence Rabbi Huda stated in the name of Bar Kapra, "Were not the accounts set down in Scripture, it would be impossible to say such a thing as, in the beginning God created on what sort of site? On the earth, which was worthless and waste, tohu vavohu." Right? Meaning that it would have been a transgression to say that God created the world on top of tohu vavohu, on chaos and void. But since the Torah says it, we can obviously say it because the Torah says it, but we wouldn't be able to say it in ourselves. Now, it's interesting what he's saying here, right? The idea is that obviously, if you see a castle, could be a beautiful castle, but you said this castle was built on garbage, basically, you would definitely think of the castle. You'd probably think of the castle less. Oh, it's just hiding garbage, right? There's nothing really beneath it, and so you would therefore demean the castle. And obviously, applying to creation, this would demean creation. But I also like to think that, like, the way in which we find knowledge today, and a lot of scientific knowledge, especially, and I would think the way Jewish scientists work, it's not that we're learning things that are beyond creation or beyond what we can normally understand, and that they make us think less of God or less of creation. Actually, oftentimes they make us think of creation as even more beautiful than we had originally even imagined. And so I can imagine sort of understanding from this Aggadah of sort of opening up a world of saying, well, actually, sometimes exploration of the world, even beyond things that specifically relate to mitzvah matters, meaning things that are commanded by Hashem specifically and help us fulfill those commandments, is acceptable in a case where understanding that knowledge actually enables us to think of the world as even more beautiful, as God's creation as more beautiful, as God is even stronger or more powerful, right? While if that information leads us to think of a God as less powerful or less beautiful or see it for less for whatever reason, that is what is forbidden. So I think the Midrash really helps us to sort of qualify this judgment of limiting our knowledge, to sort of not just limiting our knowledge, but limiting our knowledge based on how it enables us to see the world around us. If by exploring something or understanding or learning something new, it allows us to demean the world and demeans God's creation, that's what the tradition and what the Aggadah seems to be railing against here.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions, and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.